the one thing that usually doesn't get talked about when we talk about Dr. King is his ability to connect the entire social justice movement between civil rights, economic empowerment, and those things that we, as the previous speaker spoke, was across the board needs in our society to alleviate the disparities that exist. So speaking from a historical perspective, back in the 50s and 60s, President Eisenhower was, as you know, the president and had to implement the Supreme Court's decision on Brown versus the Board of Education. And while he necessarily wasn't a full supporter of that, President Eisenhower took great steps to implement the Constitution and adhere to that decision that came from the US Supreme Court. So Dr. King was very grateful to President Eisenhower for actually implementing and following to his constitutional obligation. But at the same time, Dr. King and President Eisenhower did share other things in common. One of them was President Eisenhower, if I may quote the president, Mr. President?
Senator.
This is the US president, not the Senate president. Only a fool would try to deprive working men and women of their right to join the union of their choice. Dr. King, in quoting Dr. King, said, "History is a great teacher. Now everyone knows that the labor movement did not diminish the strength of the nation, but enlarged it. By raising the living standards of millions, labor miraculously created a market for industry and lifted the whole nation to undreamed of levels of production. Those who attack labor forget these simple truths, but history remembers them." Dr. King also said the labor movement was the principal force that transformed misery and despair into hope and progress. Out of its bold struggles, economic and social reform gave birth to unemployment insurance, old age pensions, government relief for the destitute, and above all, new wage levels that meant not mere survival, but a tolerable life. The captains of industry did not lead this transformation. They resisted it until they were overcome. The whole theme was, we shall overcome. Dr. King didn't have just a dream for himself, or as Senator Dammeier said, just for his children. It was for all of our children. Back in that time, it was a dream. But if we look at it by today's standards, it almost seems like a nightmare with the hate and fear and the growing disparity between those who are doing quite well and those 99% who are living in fear on a daily basis of whether their job's even going to be there, let alone whether they're making a living wage and watching their wage lose over time. I think if Dr. King were alive today, he'd be redoubling his efforts to fight in the struggle for social justice and economic justice. His dream led to hope, and hope leads to progress. I hope that we haven't forgotten how to dream about what an egalitarian society is all about, and equity of opportunities for all that our country has to offer, and the world, in fact, has to offer. So if we're going to truly adhere to Dr. King's dream, I hope that we all redouble our efforts to address those crucial problems that we're facing in this dire time today. Thank you, Mr. President.